Welcome back to the Fast Life Podcast. Thank you guys for joining us. Got a great show, and before we get into it, let's hear from these sponsors, and then we'll get right into this episode. Simpson motorcycle helmets has been my helmet of choice for the last 4 years. I personally dig the Ghost Bandit the most, but really leaning towards rocking the Mod Bandit for the next year of riding. Really not sure yet. We'll see how that goes. If you guys want to head on over to simpsonmotorcyclehelmets.com, you can check out the models and finishes and visor options and see what fits you the best. And also, don't forget to give my guys a follow on Instagram at Simpson Motorcycle Helmets. Lexin is my go-to for not only my Bluetooth system, the FT4 Pro, on my helmets, but now my wireless charging solution on the road as well with their WPC QI wireless charger. This is a water-resistant wireless charger for the Ram Mount X Grip phone holder. This easy-to-set-up system uses a battery tender-style plug for easy install and will only set you back $64.95 with a 2-year unlimited warranty. You can also grab yourself a Lexin WPC and Ram X mount for $110 at lexin-moto.com. And at checkout, drop the Fast Life offer code and save yourself 15% off. And don't forget to give my dudes Lexin a follow on Instagram at lexin-moto. Check them out. With my recent 131 crate engine install, my thundermax ECM was able to get me an extra 136 horsepower and 146 foot-pounds over the 124 and 131 projected HD numbers with their tuner. The computer is constantly tuning my bike to the elevation and weather conditions as I ride, which gives me the optimal performance all the time. I also run the thundermax fan for the M8 touring models. The oil cooler fan was a big help with my 114 and a must with the new 131 motor. Thundermax has your EFI equipped Harley Davidsons covered, and you can check out all these products at shoptmax.com and use the offer code FASTLIFE at checkout, which saves you 10% off. And give these dudes a follow on Instagram at thundermaxefi. I recently switched all my lighting on my Road Glide to Letric Lighting Co. I'm a huge fan of the looks and the improved visibility I get from the shark tooth headlight, and I'm digging the 5-year warranty on the 15 different LED headlight options for your motorcycle. Their deluxe and premium LED turn signals offers 530 lumens of bright white running light, which are the brightest in the industry and have a lifetime warranty. And last but not least, the LED tail lamps come in a wide range of designs to add that finishing touch, and all products are plug and play. NAM's custom cycle products since 1999 have been offering American-made wiring products for all things V-twin, and Badlands for over 30 years has been offering the most reliable and dependable lighting modules in the USA, backed by a lifetime warranty. Find out more about these great companies at namscustomcycleproducts.com, and you can drop in the FL2020 offer code, which gives you free shipping on all orders over $100. Check them out, guys. John Jessup's Team Dream Rides out of Stockton, California is a one-stop shop for you to have your motorcycle customized, maintained, repaired, and upgraded with in-house dyno tuning and parts and accessories. Also, check out teamdreamrides.com online store to see the full array of products for your bike and you as a rider. And if you're short on cash, you can take advantage of the 100 days same-as-cash financing on all products on teamdreamrides.com. All you need is a job and a bank account. And while you're at it, give John and the team a follow at DreamRidesJohn on Instagram. Paint Huffer Metal Flake has been with our podcast since day one, and I've been using their flakes and pearls in my paint work for over 4 years now. And you can get started down this custom paint path as well with many must-have items for the custom paint process. Head on over to painthuffer.com and you can save yourself some coin by using FastLife21 offer code. And last but not least, you can get some inspiration by checking out all the amazing paint work created with Paint Huffer products at Paint Huffer Metal Flake on Instagram. My guest today is Bill Rodencal. He works for the HD Museum in Milwaukee, Wisconsin, and gave us a personal tour around the around the museum and showed us all the different things and the kind of key things to look for. He gave us a tour through the what do they call it, the archives, and it was amazing to see how much stuff Harley has collected and kept over the years, from early brochures from when they first started to every T-shirt design ever made, to finding one-off bikes and even the bikes they kind of made but didn't put. It was an amazing experience, and if you haven't been there, you definitely got to check it out. But in this episode, we try to cover a lot of those different things and get to know Bill a little bit better, and really enjoyed it and can't thank him enough. And once again, we did this through the House of Harley Davidson guys, and I want to thank them once again for giving us the space in their dealership, for setting up all these awesome guests out of Milwaukee, and making this whole trip a much better experience for me. So here it is. Let's get into it, and then we'll catch you on the back end of this podcast.
Hey, guys. You ready to let the dogs out?
Fast Life Podcast.
I don't edit this stuff, man. That's why I get in trouble for doing it. Well, Bill, thank you for that tour. It was awesome.
Hey, my pleasure. Thanks for stopping by.
Yeah. The thing that, before we start into that part of it, I've heard some interesting stories about you as a man.
Okay.
You toured with the Grateful Dead?
Yeah.
What was that like?
Well, I didn't actually work for them, but I followed them.
You followed them, yeah.
Followed them around the country like a lot of people did back in the day, and that was real interesting. It was in my college years and beyond, and after that. In the early 80s through the mid 90s, and so not that I have a tremendous amount. I've got about 125 actual Jerry Garcia Grateful Dead shows under my belt, and I know people that have been to 1,000. So
yeah,
125 sounds like a lot, but. I could have done
still
double.
a feat, though.
It's a feat. It was, and it was great. I met a lot of great people that are still really good friends, and a lot of great connections through that. It was a real interesting family, and and it's still a deep passion for me.
Yeah, I think being able to do something like that and travel and be in so many different types of cultures and from just city to city really gives, I think, young people a really good perspective on life. You know what I mean?
It was, I love to see and experience not only, different areas, but different people from different areas of the, and I traveled into other countries and saw them, but, so when you were there, my kind of hot button always was asking people like, okay, so where do you guys eat here in town?
Exactly.
Finding someone in when we were in Boston, or finding someone when I was in Cincinnati, and that's how I learned about things like Skyline Chili, and like what, and then you have it, and you're like, oh, this is awesome, and so just getting experiences like that, getting to deal with a lot of different people, and it's an adventure. It's the great American kind of adventure, and I think it has a lot to do with fueling my passion for motorcycling and getting on a motorcycle and traveling to different areas and
things like that.
And having we're grateful that the music was kind of the quotient that was the equalizer. Motorcycles can be that way because you're there and you're at a gas pump and people want to talk to you, or you're in a town like, wow, and I particularly ride older bikes, so that's always even a little extra conversation getter, and so it's fun.
Yeah, that's like you touched on the fact of like once you start meeting and knowing people in these areas, to find the gems of it, because when you don't know anybody and the going joke with me is like I just go to Chili's, I'm like I know what I like there, but when you know somebody from a town, you can really find those little hole in the wall bars or those hole in the wall food joints, you know what I mean, that didn't turn into a massive chain. And,
yes, and places that have been there for generations and have a history behind them. I find that very intriguing. I love to go to old barbecue joints that are in old burned out gas stations.
Yeah, Tommy was telling me, because we rode by the Juneau spot, and he was saying, there's a steakhouse around the corner that a whole bunch of deals were done with the Harley execs and dealers and and all these different people, like they would go to this steakhouse and finalize things. And
it's still there, and it's still, the best steakhouse in Milwaukee.
Nice.
It's old school. When you walk in there, it feels like someplace like where Frank Sinatra would have eaten in 1952, and it's awesome. So and it's funny because whenever I go there, I'll see people from Harley there that are with clients or something, and they're at this great old place.
What are they putting in that meat, man? Yeah, that's crazy, man. But this is my first time coming up here in Wisconsin and Illinois before this, and I'm just blown away at the cities, man. Like, it's so different than down south where I live, and just like one thing that trips me out that I like, but I don't know if it'd be good for me, is that these neighborhoods have like this community bar at every other block,
every corner,
and they don't look. It's not like down where I'm at, they have a bars, but it's like it's kind of disconnected from the community, so it doesn't have that. Man, I'm looking for the right word, but it feels like you're doing something wrong when you're there, if you will. Almost like a strip club or some shit.
Well, and I lived for 7 years in Chicago, went to school down there, and so that always felt kind of like home to me too, because there were these neighborhood corner bars. Mm-hmm. Every neighborhood had one. Most neighborhoods had several, and they're still alive and well here in Milwaukee. We've got one that we go to here, Nick's Anvil Inn, and it's only open on Monday afternoons and Friday evenings. What crazy hours, but everybody knows that's when it's open, and they can go there and see all their people that live in their neighborhood. Yeah. And it hasn't changed since 1950.
Yeah, it's like almost not capitalistic.
Yeah, no, it feels right, and it's very Wisconsin, it's very Midwestern. I think you can attest that you find the people up here are very different too. Everybody's like, hey, hi, and like, what, are you talking to me? You're saying hi to me, and that's a thing that I really enjoy about Wisconsin.
I would say that simplistic thing of having that place in your actual neighborhood is kind of a way for adults to form friendships with their neighbors, as opposed to like if you don't, then I might see Sally at the grocery store, or something like that, but
or never see him. I lived next door to this guy for 15 years and didn't know who he is. Like these little corner bars, especially a lot of them, you have to realize are what we call third shift bars. Uh-huh. So with all the kind of factory work going on around here, with 3 shifts going on, there's bars that you can walk out at 7 a.m. at the end of third shift and walk into a bar, because that's your Friday night is 7 a.m. and there's a lot of those in West Allis and in Milwaukee, and
that feels American right there.
Yeah, it's a great thing, and they're great and they're fun, and there's always a crock pot going with some kind of food in there, whether it's some kind of egg bake or something in the morning. My wife and I kind of have a tradition where we'll actually go to on Thanksgiving. We get the turkey going, and then okay, let's go hit a couple of third shift bars, and we head out at 7 and we're home by 11 a.m.
Wow. That's pretty cool, man. Like I said, that's one of the things about this city that's just the architecture and being such a factory city, especially being on the lake here with just moving things around and everything. The days I'm here, there's no way I can do it justice and find out all the gyms and things.
Yeah, so. Well, in the state we're in right now too, obviously. But in the summer, Summerfest, you take things like that in Milwaukee, where we're a huge music town too. Mm-hmm. World's largest music festivals held right here in Milwaukee. Not a lot of people realize that. 700 bands over 10 days. That's incredible. And so you can see anybody. The nice thing is we're kind of like halfway between Minneapolis and Chicago. Mm-hmm. So you get a lot of those bands that suddenly we're playing here one day and there 2 days later. Mm-hmm. We got a day, we can squeeze Milwaukee. And so we get the Paul McCartneys and the Rolling Stones, and you get the big names, and then you get the guys that are slugging it out, in their van coming through and playing shows too. So it's an incredible music town, great sports town, great food town, and the beer capital of the world. Don't ever doubt it. Yeah. And Harley Davidson. How about that?
We'll get to that part. Now the PBR Easy, you see the baby blue case over there?
Yeah. That's like sweeping the nation, isn't it?
Well, it did. So it hit Dallas, and one of our local bars in our bar district, because that's how we have it in Texas.
Yeah.
Started carrying it, because we would do a bike night there every week, and then he'd be like, "Hey man, we got this new stuff in," because we would always get just PBR because they had it on tap anyway.
Right. Yep.
Or it's like you get a tall boy for like $2, so it's like screw it. And they had that come in, and it was just such a smooth beer that like we all fell in love with it, but then it kind of like started disappearing in other areas. It's like you like it, but no one else is trying it, so it doesn't like stick on the menu more or less. So
the big one that's kind of happening around here now that's really interesting, and I see a lot of people putting up like, "Oh my God, I tried this and this is fantastic," is the hard coffee.
Yeah, I've seen that. Yeah.
And so, it's like, here's this great coffee that PBR makes that's, got a kick to it, and in that one, so keep your eyes out for that too.
My wife started drinking the seltzers.
Oh yeah.
And they're huge alcohol content in those things, and of course they're the tall boys.
Yep.
So she just needs one or two. So a 6-pack lasts all week for her. But and the other thing I wanted to ask you about was the Cannonball Run that you did.
You bet.
And that was on a 1920.
No, so
what was that?
So the motorcycle Cannonball is a really spectacular event. Started by Lonnie Isom Jr. He passed away. A young guy passed away of brain cancer, but it was a kind of a idea he had. Big guy in the antique motorcycle community, and back in about 2008, 2009, he called me. He says, "Hey, I'm thinking about doing this ride, and it's going to be pre-1915 motorcycles, and we're going to ride across the country." And I said, "That's totally crazy, but I'm in."
Yeah.
And so he did it. We did the inaugural one in 2010. There were 90 people that signed up. There were 70 people that paid to do it, and 43 of us showed up at the starting line. So there was quite a bit of attrition right there. When we were done, I think 40 of us made it to the West Coast, and even the bikes that kind of didn't make it, we put them on a trailer and got them to the West Coast at least. It was kind of a group effort. The first one was interesting because no one had done it, and so we didn't know, like, what's this going to be? And so we were kind of the litmus test. Subsequently, and it has grown, and now they get about 100 riders. They've done different year cutoff points, but it's usually 29 and down, 16 and down. I did it the second time in 2016, 6 years later, and that was 1916 and down bike. So everybody had at least a 100-year-old motorcycle. And the route changes. So you always go from at least one coast to the other. This year's got canceled, but they're going to actually end up kind of skipping a year and do it next year. Very interesting. So the first one I did on a 1914 single-cylinder, single-speed Harley Davidson factory board track racer. And in 2016, I did it on a twin-cylinder 1915 factory board track racer, single-speed.
How is it riding something like that across the country?
There's certain years where guys had, mine were kind of unique because I had a rigid front fork, fixed seat, rigid rear. So my bike was 100% no suspension, basically like a bicycle. Even my seat was fixed, like a board, didn't have springs on it. Other guys have done it, when you do later model ones, it's a little different. Mine was, like I always say, anybody can ride across the country, drive across the country in a Cadillac. I wanted to do it on a lawnmower. Yeah, and,
that's a good analogy.
And it really kind of was. It was really hard. I mean, a lot of it's in preparation, how you prepare. The other thing is, physically, it takes a great toll on your body and on the machine. But what I the first time didn't prepare for was the mental aspect of it. For instance, the first one we went across kind of, out of Alabama and Texas and Oklahoma and New Mexico, Arizona. So, here you are on this rigid bike at 37 miles an hour, and you do 300 miles, and it's 98 degrees. And then you work on your bike till midnight, you go to bed, you wake up at 5 a.m., you get on your bike, you do 300 miles, You get in at 5, 6 o'clock at night. You work on your bike till midnight. You get a few hours sleep. You get up. You do another 300 miles, and maybe the third day's in the
like
rain.
a top of 35 miles an hour.
37 was kind of my sweet
37,
spot.
yeah.
So you're doing like 900 miles in 3 days, which 900 miles in a day on a good bagger is a piece of cake. On that at 35 miles an hour, it's a grind. And you're in the desert and the sun's beating on you, and
you take away all the comforts of
everything.
Modern.
You don't know, is it going to rain today? Is it going? We had days where in 2016 where we rode into Williams, Arizona, and it was 100 degrees getting there. You get there, you wake up the next morning, it's 32 degrees. You get on your bike, you come down out of Williams, and by noon at lunchtime, it was 100 degrees again. Yeah. So you had like these 70-degree swings and
Yeah, that desert is pretty unpredictable.
Yeah.
I've left in certain times of the year and gone across and thought I could get away with a flannel, and found out real quick when the sun goes down, so does all the heat.
Exactly. We went across the Mojave Desert and just having enough gas. So, I had a bag strapped to the handlebar, a gas bag, so you had enough gas to get 90 miles across, and all these things you had to kind of take into consideration. But it was something that I trip of a lifetime. I was lucky enough. My support crew was my wife and daughters, and cool. They were my daughters were young the first time. The second time they were old enough to drive, so it was just my daughters as my crew.
That's cool.
And they would go ahead to the next town and kind of set up your shop where you were going to work on your bike in the hotel parking lot.
What kind of work did you need to do on the bikes after the days?
Well, it varied. I had, obviously oddball things happen while you're on the ride, and you've got to kind of MacGyver your way out of them. Mm-hmm. And then other stuff is just kind of general maintenance, adjusting chains and if you blew a tire out or something and you kind of put a tube in, you want to actually kind of take a better look at it. Yeah. And then you have one day off in over 16 days, and like that's okay, let's blow apart the wheel bearings and see what's going on. And some guys blew apart their engines just to see what's going on inside. And I put a push rod through a rocker arm right in the middle of Ohio. Broke down at the end of a farmer's driveway, and I'm kind of bummed, and I'm waiting. And they have a sweep truck for those that don't make it. If you can't get it fixed, they'll pick you up. So I'm kind of waiting for the sweep truck because this push rod's sticking out through the arm. Yeah. And I'm like, I'm here, and the farmer comes down, and what are you guys doing? And we explain to him, I'm just waiting for the truck, and I wait here. Yeah, he goes, but I got a TIG welder up in the barn if you want to use it. I'm like, yeah, let's go. And pushed the bike up and put a cap head screw I cut off in there and tigged it in there and set up the push rod. And the guy gave me a push and down his driveway, and I finished the day, and you're like, yeah, like that was an awesome day. That's just, that's luck.
Yeah, that's my buddy. He does a podcast too. His name's Danger Dan. He likes to do the riding across the country on vintage choppers as well.
Sure.
And he always says, man, the road provides.
Yeah, yeah.
That's the kind of stuff that would happen to him. Like, for anybody else, it would be game over. You know what I mean? And then just luck of the draw.
Luck of the draw. I broke a valve spring once, and how the springs are, and then the ends, they kind of have it, where it's terminated. Mm-hmm. And I'm like, what can I do? And I was like, what if I flipped it around and put the two flats together and did it and put it together and set it up and rode 150 miles on two pieces of a broken valve spring,
That's crazy.
just kind of, like, what if? And, I had a guy looking at my shoulder, that might work, he says.
With those engines being very, for lack of a better term, primitive.
Yeah.
It's almost like common items could probably at least Band-Aid it. You know what I mean?
Exactly. Very simple. And, I've seen, there's a guy, Ryan Leighton Allen, who rode a 13 Indian, and he broke his throttle cable, and he hooked a thing up to it so he could just pull the throttle cable as he's going down the road, and literally rode a couple 100 miles that way.
That's crazy.
Pulling it like a piece of fishing line.
Yeah, I don't know. That sounds like a crazy event. That it would either have to be a lot of beers drunk and somebody very convincing to get me to be like, yes, let's do this. But I mean, it'd be fun to watch or have documented. You know what I mean, and see through some type of video thing.
Yeah, and it's a great event, and I have to say that the whole Cannonball thing, it's really become a family. Once you do it, you realize wow, this is something very different, and there's some great people that have done it, and my kids and everybody, they're considered the the original Cannonball family, because we had a family and did it. And a group of the guys actually that were going to ride it, because the Cannonball would be going on right now.
Yeah.
Since they couldn't, they all went to Arkansas this year, and they're doing something called the Musket Ball, which is they say it's like the Cannonball, only it's smaller. And they got 35 guys, and they're riding for like 4 days just to get their Jones out, because they were so ready to do it this year.
And so was it like every other year originally, or was?
Yeah, every
okay.
2 years on
Okay.
even years, exactly. So, we had them stop at the Harley-Davidson Museum in 2012. And so the company's been a great supporter of it. They've done some great stories on it in Hog Magazine, and so it's an amazing event. But I'll never do it again.
Until the next one comes along.
I think this last one really did me in, and it was like, I have nothing else to prove anymore. I proved to myself what I wanted to do, and it gets kind of hairy and kind of dangerous. You're out there because sometimes they got to run you on an interstate, and you're 30 miles an hour, and semis are going by at 80, and
the wind, the
rain, heat, sleet, everything. We ran into it all, and so we had a day in New Mexico that was actually the most recorded rainfall since 1929.
Yeah, and the rain out there in the desert, it's a lot different than in the Midwest, where it floods a lot easier. You know what I mean?
It's all rock. It's got nowhere to go, and it hasn't rained, and so suddenly it's like, everything's underwater, and literally the water's, entire parts of the course were washed out, and we came across stuff where it was 4 inches of water, and it's got nowhere to go.
Yeah.
So, cars and things had washed out of the mountains and piled up, and it was crazy. I'd never seen anything like it, and it can get real sketchy real quick. It's,
Emails going off. Yeah, that's I've heard about it. I think Jody Perowitz done it at a time. I listened to her do a podcast about it that was pretty interesting. It's just, I guess it's just weird because some of us are, we're just like, man, we're just trying to hit Sturgis every year. You know what I mean? And here you guys are riding, impossible motorcycles. But then it's crazy, like being in the dealership today, or not the dealership, but the museum, and just seeing all that old memorabilia from like I said, for you in the museum, you remember these names like it's nothing, and I already forgot her name, but she was like one of the enthusiasts, or
Vivian Bales, the enthusiast girl, 1929, young single female hopping on a 45 cubic inch Harley DL, brand new model, and rode from Albany, Georgia up around through Milwaukee and back, made like a 3,000 mile loop, and different times. You got to think about being a young female on a motorcycle in those days. That was alone. Alone. It was quite a feat. You don't know what you're going to run up into or who you're going to run into, and but had a huge passion for motorcycling. And it's the spirit of those kind of people, and people that Effie Hotchkiss, that her and her mom in 1915 got in a sidecar and rode to California and then back crazy. Over to the East Coast again, and that's the spirit of what the Cannonball is. And when Lonnie wanted to originally do it, he was like, this guy Cannonball Baker did it. Let's see if we can do it, on today's roads. He did it back then, and I guess that's what to me is always so magical about the first one, is like none of us knew what it was. Mm-hmm. Subsequent, it has changed a little because guys got bigger rigs as far as support trucks and all that sort of thing. We were kind of a bunch of guys with minivans and garden trailers, and we didn't know what we were up into. But it was, and we all just were trying to get. No one was trying to win or anything like that. We were just trying to can we get all of us from one coast to the other? Yeah, because that's all that meant.
That's a very tough challenge, and I think that it wouldn't be as important about who got first as opposed to everybody making it. You know what I mean? Like it was more of a community effort than a competition, I would think, right?
Yes. And it was fun, and I had a beer sponsor the first year, so they told me, "What's your number?" My number was 33. They gave me 33 cases of beer, so we filled the truck up with beer, and every night everybody knew that they could come to our truck, and it was we talk about what we saw that day, and it was just it was so much fun, and there's nothing like it.
That's awesome, man. I think that I would probably be down to do something like that. But like I said, it would have to be over a course of beers, and somebody would have to really convince me very well. So how did you actually find yourself in this position you're in, curating the museum?
Well, yeah. So that's a little. I'm not the curator. I'm the collections lead. I kind of take care of the specifically the motorcycle collection at the Harley Davidson Museum. So believe it or not, and this is a true story. How did I end up there? I saw an ad in a magazine. I had a completely different life before I came down here 17 years ago. My family was a 3-generation Dodge dealer in northern Wisconsin. And for my fun thing, I messed around with antique motorcycles and restored them. And then I started a business making parts and supplies for people that restored motorcycles. Kind of a cottage business. And that was when the internet was really new, like in 1996, 97. And I would go to dealerships all over, little rural dealerships, and ask if they had old parts, and I would buy their old stock, and I would put it out on the internet for people that were looking for new old stock parts, and no one was really doing that at that time, and kind of grew it into a business. And we used to sit at Davenport, Iowa was a huge antique motorcycle swap meet. We'd always sit around there with my buddies and talk smart around the fire at night. And the joke always was, if you won the lottery, would you still work? And I always said, yeah, they got to have someone that restores motorcycles at Harley Davidson, don't they? And thought that, that was sort of funny, and, never thought there was an actual job for it. And I was going through Buzz Walnick's Classic Cycle Trader once, and there was an ad in there. I still have it. I ripped it out, and I still have it to this day. And it said, wanted motorcycle restorer, first shift. I showed it to my wife, and I said, what do you think? And she's like, you got to put your resume in. And I said, but I'm not looking for a job. She goes, yeah, but whoever gets to do that in their life. Yeah. And so I went, yeah, okay. And I never thinking I'd even get called or anything. And I went through a series of interviews and had to make the tough decision to move my family and leave my family business, and my wife had to leave her family business to take a lot less money to go do something that was,
more passion driven.
I wouldn't say that, because I really did enjoy my family business, and I enjoyed the people and the customers, and I enjoyed the history of that. It was just something that was different, that was kind of like, my dad summed it up the best when I kind of told him this is what I'm thinking of doing. It was the day before I had to let him know, and he didn't know I would even been, and I said, hey, I got an obligation to this family, but what do you think about this? And he'd always say, life isn't a dress rehearsal. He says, I always had a lot of things that were offered to me that I didn't take, and I regret them. This is your chance not to regret this. And I was like, woo. And so I made the decision to do it, and it was tough. And but I'm glad to say I'm still there and still love it every day. And I work for great people, and I work with super great, talented, and amazing people that make it. To make it fun to go to work every day.
Yeah. And you said that the museum was opened in 2010?
2008.
Oh, 2008.
Yep.
Okay.
So we've been open 12 years now.
Okay. Because I was talking to Tommy on the way down there. He's like, yeah, this, they opened this and so. I was like, man, I could have swore it was open longer, but for me in my timeline, I got into the motorcycle industry in 2004 at the height of the chopper craze.
You bet.
And was just kind of wet sanding parts for a paint shop. Yep. But we were also doing bikes for like the biker build off and things like that. Yep. So at the time, that was my introduction into motorcycles. Sure. And I was like, oh, these are amazing. But we were at the time working on $50,000, $60,000, $70,000 choppers. Like, I was like, man, what are these Hondas over here? You know what I mean? So I went into the sport bike category. And then finally outlived that in my riding days, and then bought my first Harley. I bought my first brand new Harley in 2012, but 2008, 9-ish, I started riding. My mom had a Harley, and I started riding hers.
Sure.
And then from there, it just kind of, I think I really started getting a very passion for the brand itself, probably over the last 5 or 6 years. And the one thing that did that was when I went from brand new road glides and fell in love with an FXR.
Sure.
You know, and so that was like pushing me to start looking at what Harley was, you know, and instead of just like looking at all these new things that are coming out, which I got a brand new road glider.
Sure.
It's almost 2 years old now, but those
I
old
hear
bikes,
all these new bikes start with a button, right?
Yeah, they do. It's pretty. It can be confusing because there's a couple buttons. There's a sequence to it. But yeah, man, it's you know, and a lot of people in my, like, I guess, generation, I felt like would get inspired to get by bikes by a certain trend in the bike, which is, I think, how most of us end up falling into it. But sometimes I would feel like maybe they didn't have the interest in the other bikes that were previous, you know, and things like that. So when the museum, you know, I've heard it the last 10 years, man, you got to check it out. You got to do it.
Yep.
And just really have never had a chance to come up here for anything. You know, it's like saving up to go to Sturgis, and then literally 2 weeks later, it's the deal up here. It's like, man, I can't do that too.
Right.
You know, so I'm glad I actually got to do it now, though.
Well, it's great. And, you know, especially, you know, because Sturgis is kind of, I mean, I love it as much as anything. This is the first year I didn't go. So it was kind of a different year. And so people could kind of like, well, my normal plan of attack that I always do, I can't do. So I'm going to do something different. And so it's great to hear. And I'm glad that you did get to see it. And, you know, the interesting thing, and I talk to people from all over the world that, you know, have either, you know, stumbled on us or, you know, have spent the last 5 years saving to fly here from Germany to specifically come see it. Yeah. So, I mean, it runs the gamut. But the interesting thing is I've never, ever met anyone yet that says, this is exactly what I thought it would be. Everybody is like, man, this is not what I thought it would be. Like this, you know, they think it's, you know, I've heard everything from, you know, it's going to be a Quonset hut with like 50 motorcycles and a dirt floor, to, you know, like I thought it was going to be, you know, it's just so many different. And when they come and they see what it is, it's you know, it's a spectacular place, and we're really blessed to have it in the city of Milwaukee, and you know, it's such an amazing collection, and it's so great to share it with the world and to share it. You know, I mean, I've had people that have, you know, come and saved and, you know, brought their husband's ashes from South America and, you know, are literally like, I'm here in tears. And, you know, I mean, if stuff like that doesn't move you, nothing, you know, you're not human. And so, you know, just to see what this brand means to people from all over the world, it's, you know, and that's
got to be like heavy to take in all that, all of that
every
emotion.
day, every day, because it's always new to some person every day, and that's, you know, I had a group of guys today that were here, and they were asking about a certain bike. I said, well, yeah, you can kind of see it. It's here on the racks, and told them the story of it. And they were a bunch of Blue Knights, which is a police motorcycle organization, and they'd ridden up from Chicago for the day, and their first time there. And, you know, I mean, they were just like, man, this is amazing, you know, and it's so close to us. It's 90 miles from Chicago. Like, how can we, you know? And so it's, you know, that's the fun part. And that's the part that is a lot like my family business, because I had great customers and I met new people, and, you know, we were a real easygoing, small town, tiny auto dealership, and you dealt with generations of people. And I still get that contact. I'm lucky enough to have an area that, you know, the public can kind of view into and at least talk to me. And so I just love talking to people and love talking about Harley Davidsons with people.
It's like you got the best part of being a salesman. You get to sell them on the brand, but you don't have to like try to convince them to buy it.
I don't got to do the paperwork either.
Yeah, exactly. Well, there's interest.
And you know, the other thing is there's not a lot of selling there, because, you know, there's a lot of people, albeit most of our customers are not motorcycle people. Actually, like 80% are.
Bring that up,
but the 20% of the people that are, you know, you don't have to sell them. They're all in. That's why they're there. That's why they came from Germany or Indonesia or wherever. You know, and you don't have to speak their language. You don't have to do. They're just, you know, they're in awe, and you know what they're thinking and what they're feeling, and that's you know.
How was it when that Harley and the Davidsons came out a couple years back? Was it pretty accurate? Or
No.
was it?
I will say that we actually kind of worked with them in the beginning with that, and there are some things in it that that portray the founders as being, they were passionate guys and they were driven, and a lot of those things that they showed that were accurate. But a lot of the other stuff, and understandably, has to be put in because, if you make a documentary that's about four guys that develop a business plan and, build a American company through, a strong dealer network, and no one wants to watch that. So you got to have a little whiskey in there, and you got to have a little
competition,
some fight, some competition, a couple of fist fights, and that's Hollywood. And they made it evident to us that they were going to have to do that in order to achieve what they wanted. And but that being said, people in general enjoyed it. And I know people that are dealers that I talked to said it was good, and it built some traffic, and it built some interest, and it got people to come through their doors. And I saw it at the museum that, okay, I want to investigate this a little further.
Yeah.
And it motivated people to maybe step through the threshold into an area that they weren't comfortable in.
Yeah, I mean, the first time I ever saw the Golden Gate Bridge, I went back home or to where we were staying that night and Googled it and watched YouTube videos that somebody had curated and put it online to kind of see the process. So I've always been
built
that way.
And sure,
Yeah.
and what's the history of it, and how many people have jumped off it in their day, and how many lived.
Yeah, exactly. So it's like that for a lot of things, traveling on motorcycles a lot, you find yourself going through towns like this, and then you start to think man, what was it like to be here? All these factories that are now like lofts and things like that. Or even when you're going out west and you hit some of these like small towns that didn't really survive or something like that, or whatever the case, or the highway left them behind.
Yep.
And it's always fascinating to me. I mean, I guess the older that I get, the more history is interesting, And I was always interested growing up, but it's a refreshing type of entertainment compared to the kind of nonsense that we have going on in the world everywhere all the time. So, with their form of entertainment. So,
and the other thing is it's the truth, right? This is what happened, and this is how we got from point A to point B. And, people could maybe argue the minutia of it. It's really, here's a story. And it's an interesting story. Our story is particularly answered just that we had kind of the perfect storm with the right four guys that all had their own individual kind of strength and made it happen. It was a kind of a perfect storm. And we were blessed the fact that as it was happening, they were smart enough and had the foresight to document it and save it and save materials that they'd made and save marketing materials and save their notes and save brand new motorcycles off the assembly line in 1910.
Yeah.
So that, and consistently do that through good times, bad times, depressions, wars. They got their hands full of other things, and they still maintained that rigor of doing that, so that we have this cachet here in Milwaukee that we can share with the world and tell the great American success story.
Yeah, the archives, man. That was it's not really like a part of the exhibit for the most part, but like just all the rows of boxes and the memorabilia, the marketing material that you had mentioned, the brochures with the same brochure but with all the different languages, because they were selling bikes all over the world without the internet, with no airplanes really to take you from point A to point B. Like you made a good point about how which Davidson was it that had to do the travel?
So Arthur did a lot of traveling. He'd love to travel as a hobby, and he kind of combined that with the motorcycle business. We actually have all of his passports, going back into the early teens when he would, go to Australia, and reason for entering the country, motorcycle business. And, as long as I'm going to go visit it, I might as well see if I can set up a motorcycle distributorship there. And you think of what it took in 1910 13 to set up a distributorship in Japan. You take a train across America and get on a steamship and go to some country where you don't speak the language and convince some guy to give you his life savings to sell motorcycles made in Milwaukee, Wisconsin. It's really Jack and the Beanstalk kind of magic bean
magic
stuff.
Beans, yeah.
It's that's when you think of that in its essence, that's pretty amazing stuff. And not just Japan, but do it in Brazil where they speak Portuguese and all these different barriers, and to have it like not stop you and just be like, I don't care about that. I'm gonna I make a great product and make something that people are really going to enjoy, and build that into by 1920. 17 years, we're the largest motorcycle manufacturer in the world. Mm-hmm. And, like you say, printing our literature in 12 languages.
Yeah, that's insane. But like you said, it was amazing that they thought they had the foresight to save all this stuff.
Yeah.
And seeing some of the original bikes, for my FXR family out there, seeing like original RT or police models with like 2 miles on it. And it's literally miles from pushing the bike around.
Yep.
Because those all had wheel driven whatchamacallit,
speedometer drive on it. So it's and to see pictures of that bike there you're looking at, here's a picture of it in 1938 when it was a year old and in the collection at that time. And what's great is our collection is so big. What's on display is kind of a tiny portion, but we have the ability like in our clubs and competition with all the club clothing. And that stuff we didn't save, but we went out and got. We've changed that up 4 times since we've been open. So while it looks kind of the same as you're there, I guarantee all those uniforms in there are different than the last time you were here. So that's the way we can keep bringing out new stuff and refreshing it for the next visit, but yet still kind of make it feel familiar and comfortable. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that's the club history, and it's like when you tell me in my younger age, I guess you'd say, club, and I'm start thinking of like Hell's Angels and more of the stuff that we saw downstairs on the first floor, but we're talking like some like almost like get-ups from like a band of the 20s and 30s or something, or some some
all
Johnny
the
Cash
matching
thing.
uniforms and the Western shirts and all that. And what's great about that is even at events like Sturgis and different things like that, they would have competitions for the best dressed club, and your club would do a lineup with your bike. So like people in clubs would even try and buy the same model and year motorcycle in the same color, and so they all matched. And you see some of those competitions and it's great. They'd have the tallest rider and the shortest rider, and fun things like that were just kind of endearing. We do our big vintage weekend is called Wild Ones Weekend, and we kind of harken back to a 1940s vintage motorcycle parade, and we do field games, and we do all these great activities, corn roasts, and we have a ride-in antique show. We usually get 100 and 120 motorcycles there in the show, and then just make a fun day of it, and do the weenie bite and do all those sorts of things that people have never seen, and kind of like it's almost like a Civil War reenactment, but we do like a reenactment of what the 1940s motorcycle rally was. And they were huge events in those days, because you didn't have the pastimes that we have. You didn't have the internet. You didn't have TV to watch. You didn't have any of those things. So people went out and rode motorcycles and had fun and drank a little beer. And
we do a lot of campouts. We host one, and then we go to some other people's and stuff. And that's kind of been like a lot of people request that, like, man, you should do biker games. You know what I mean? And it's like, that's, I mean, as you're orchestrating all these events, it's not like the first thing in your head, but it's one of those things that like you get people involved right there on the spot. You know what I mean? And I don't know. I need to probably do that for my camp out of it.
Yeah, it's fun. And what works great for us is that, you can get one rider, 2 riders. We get huge crowds of families and people that come in to kind of see this, because it's a free event. And, it's really entertaining for them. First off, it's just crazy to watch, if you've never seen how someone rides a hand shift motorcycle, but then, to do it with a welding mask on or a blindfold and, and go around cones and people are, running over stuff, and it's fun, and, it's just it's kind of good old fashioned,
horseplay.
yeah, kind of Mayberry-esque, but you realize that there's fun stuff to it, and everybody has a great time, and so we're really proud of those things that we've built over the years and really grown them into fun events.
Yeah, that's cool. Yeah, I like that, man. The as a painter, the wall was pretty. The tanks was pretty awesome to see. Like the, I guess it's kind of like in chronological order of, or like, I don't know what the word is.
Yep.
Is that it?
Yeah.
Okay.
Yep.
And just seeing the tanks, and then like seeing where my last 16 years of Harley repair and things like that. So I fixed that tank before, and
Sure.
that paints. So that was pretty cool.
And everybody has that kind of whether you own a Harley Davidson or not, somewhere along the line you've had some kind of connection or interaction.
Yeah.
It's come into your life, and I say that, and I remember before we built the museum, I had an alderman, and I was touring all the aldermen of our old archives and saying, like, this is the stuff we're going to build in this new museum, and we're going to tell all these stories of, because somehow Harley Davidson touched you. Mm-hmm. And I had an alderman who was like, no way. It didn't. I had nothing to do. Where I grew up, there were no Harleys. I never had anything like that. I said, so, and different people came up. One guy that was on there, his dad had worked for Harley Davidson on the assembly line and everything. And this guy was like, nope. And he was like totally against it. And we get to the end, and in my house I had a picture of Evel Knievel, and he goes, oh my God, is that Evel Knievel? I go, yeah. He goes, did he ride a Harley? I said, yeah, he jumped Harley Davidson's. He goes, man, I never missed him when I was a kid. I watched him on ABC. You'd go home, and I go, see, Harley Davidson touched you. And he's like, you're right.
Mm-hmm.
So, whether it was, you're watching John Kennedy being assassinated, Harleys were in that motorcade. I always say we're the Forrest Gump of motorcycles. Any historic event, World War II, World War I,
Yeah.
Pancho Villa trying to get him down into Mexico. Here Harleys were there, and that's the things that you get to see and learn and get out of our museum. They're like, wow, I never knew that, and it's always a good day if you learn at least one thing. And,
It's kind of funny you say that, because I started thinking about something from my past, and I hope it's appropriate. But so I grew up. My stepdad was in a motorcycle club in the '80s.
Sure.
So it was kind of rough, but as a kid, I used to go to field meets with them all the time, and we'd camp in the van and things like that. Yeah. And so the first time I ever saw boobs was actually an Easy Rider that another boy there stole
from somebody.
And they're like, hey, come over here. And we're like, what is it? You know what I mean? So it just kind of popped back up into my head, man, because it was we used to do things like that all the time. Thinking back, they would do like little hill climbs and stuff on their bikes and screw around, all kinds of stuff. But
have their fun club parties that were, and I grew up playing in bands even, and playing for different clubs around northern Wisconsin. That was always a great time. They'd hire our band, and they'd have their little summer Hummer kind of blowout.
Yeah.
And so and it's somehow, like I always say, and there you go. There's an interesting way of tying your first.
Yeah, it's like and then this was the '80s,
Sure.
and then all the 2000s, just culture in general was pretty overpowering. I'm sure it was for any teenager in the '80s as well, but just out of sight, out of mind. And then I fell in love with the idea of working with my hands. And then the motorcycle, around that time of like Motorcycle Mania and the Monster Garage and stuff, it was just showing like I worked in a paint and body shop, and I absolutely hated it, right? It was just like, this is so boring. I'm dirty every day.
Yeah, it's tough on me.
My
I'm
hands.
doing collision. Everything I'm working on is beat up and doesn't fit.
Those shows come out, and all of a sudden, everything that I felt like I did every day was now portrayed in a very cool way.
Sure.
Because it was on a motorcycle.
Yeah.
You know what I mean?
And they were creating something.
Yeah.
It wasn't you were just, someone got in a car accident and you were fixing that. You were.
Exactly. As a kid growing up, I was always drawing. I loved comic books and things like that. But, as you start to hit, young adult, you're like, man, I'm not as good as like a comic strip artist. You know what I mean? I can't do that. I don't know how to work with computers the same way like, Pixar was back in the early 2000s. So you just kind of put the art to the side and then start working, and then oh shit, I can paint and do artwork and then blend like this childhood passion with this thing that I didn't want to do, but now I found a way to do it and make it kind of creative and fun and expression. Yeah. And that's why we were walking through the museum and I saw those pinstripe brushes, and that was real fascinating to me that you guys even had those original ones. And then you said the guy started in 1920. Yeah,
he worked in the late 20s for us through the mid 70s, and as striping tanks. It's what he did all day long. And Young was his name, John Young, and we have his brushes after he retired. Wow. Just think of, he went from JDs to VLs to knuckleheads to panheads to shovelheads to he did them all, and that's pretty awesome. Do
you know how they used to do the stencils on the tanks back then?
They didn't do stencils on the tanks back then. Everything back in 20s and the 40s, they actually would do a painter sample. Like, here's the styling. There was no styling department even, and they would create like, this is the look, give it to the painter, and you just duplicate that on every single one. So they're all a little different. They're like a thumbprint. You look at stripes, and all the bikes I were in different. The width of it'll be a hair different, even though they're using the same brush. The amount of pressure spreads the paint differently. So they're all a little bit different, but yet they're really, really close. I mean, it gets to be, if you do 10,000 JD tanks, and you're doing both sides and fenders and that, by the end, it's pretty consistent. And
yeah, just like I was telling you, man, just doing those stripes every day, like the control he must have. He could have his hand could be this, but then as soon as it hits the thing, it's just like it's on rails. You know what I mean? So
there's a real neat video if you ever get a chance. Royal Enfield, believe it or not, still has a guy that hand paints, and he grabs that tank, and you can watch him lay that gold stripe
seen that,
on there.
And that's gone around our community as far as painters. Like, holy shit, you know what I mean? Because it's
it's awesome. I mean, I just. You watch that guy and you're like, man, And I know some great stripers that are, the same. But you think of that guy, he's a production guy, right? He's not he's just getting the job done. And man, it's and as well. I think gold's a tough one to do, and they'll get the metallic and all that kind of stuff to lay right and not to be too thick or too thin, and so those guys in that time when they were building these motorcycles for Harley, I think all the gas tanks were cut out. You were a tinner by trade, and you cut it out, and it was tin sheet metal, and you soldered them together, and then they went to a guy who enameled them, and then eventually a guy that striped them, and they were all craftsmen hand building it. It wasn't a machine stamping this out and then something welding it. They were doing them all by hand, piece by piece. And I've taken bikes apart, and on the inside you'll see thumbprints where they held it, so it wouldn't drift around while they were spraying it, or where in the varnish their thumbprint is there, or that they would dip their brush to stripe it and they'd have too much paint, so they daub a little on the back, to get it off the brush and then go stripe it. And you'd see these little test things kind of on the inside of the tanks that, no one ever sees because there's so very few original paint bikes left, but yet alone, get to crack one apart that's never been apart in 90 years and, see those little, kind of
that's insane.
Things that I love. Yeah, and that's, of course I always grab my camera and take pictures of that because that stuff's just,
So, how much do you know, don't mean to insult you, but how much do you know about the whole time between the AMF days you know what I mean? Like, how was that with the dealer? There was a small exhibition. I saw some of the video, but like it just seemed like such a strange time, with all the Japanese bikes and other bikes coming into the markets and
it was a strange time, and there's a lot of misnomers about it. A lot of people think that that those are like terrible years, and they really weren't. If you look at the time kind of leading up to that, there were some problems. The companies, their volume was down. They had capital problems. Their tool and machinery was way old and outdated and wouldn't hold tolerances and those sorts of things. And AMF kind of came in and saw it as an opportunity to add to their portfolio of recreational things. They made Hatteras yachts, and they made Voigt exercise equipment, and they made, Roadmaster bicycles and all these different things they made. And they said, well, we should, add a motorcycle to it, right? Leisure sports. And Willie always said, they just didn't really understand motorcycles or motorcycling. They saw it as another commodity of that. But the thing that they did do was take us from a factory at that time in 1973 that was 60 years old and done over 6 floors, and moved it out to York to an automated assembly line facility so you could manufacture motorcycles in a more streamlined way and materials as needed, and use more modern tools and machinery to do it, and infuse some capital into the company so they could, change designs and add designs and, compete in a different way. And you had part of the family at that time in the late 60s that kind of saw that as like, I don't want to have any part of that. I'm ready to be out of it. And so it kind of was, each needed each other at that time. And I firmly believe, we wouldn't be able to take you through the Harley-Davidson Museum today had AMF not been there. If it would have to go the way it would have, that company would have probably been, defunct by the mid-1970s in the gas crunch somewhere in there, not many years later. So they did a great deal to kind of move things ahead. And granted, there were some tough times post-1981 and, until, say, 84, 85 when things started to kind of turn the corner. But getting them from that period of time was pretty huge.
And I remember on that video it said that basically they were trying to go public with the company, which would, take it from a business like mine where I'm, just owning, borrowing, lending, things like that versus publicly traded. So because that's, like from what I hear from the circles, at Sturgis and bike things, it's like nobody liked the Harleys that they were putting out in the 80s, or that there was I wouldn't say nobody liked them. It was just like kind of like when the new Softails came out, there was all this negative backlash, and then after people got done talking, then Harley's all right, now ride it. Yeah. And then everybody loves it.
Right. Because what's not to love, and,
exactly.
and we knew that, that with that product, when it was going to happen, people that were in the know that actually, ride motorcycles and really know, they were like, this is going to blow some minds. And, we knew some of the hardest part would be getting our dealers to get on board, because you got some California dealers and, they had strong sales with certain models and once they rode it even, they were like, this is a no-brainer, right? It's a better product. It's a better motorcycle. Yeah. And I guarantee you that a late 70s, early 80s Shovelhead is a better bike than a 1966 FL. It's just, better brakes and better everything all around in it. And, a lot of people, because of AMF and, they're associated with all these other kind of leisure products and stuff like that, maybe it didn't fit. But if you strictly look at it from a business perspective, it was, they were a lifesaver for the company. Yeah. That's why we're here today.
Exactly. And then, I had a lot of points, but I need to be better at writing things down and bringing it back up. But going through the the culture through the 80s and 90s, it seemed like it was starting to become more. I'm kind of skipping around in my own thoughts right now, so I'm trying to narrow it down. But and all I can really attest to is the part that I actually lived through consciously and know what happened, which is basically the 04 to now kind of time frame. But the resurgence of everybody wanting to go back to vintage motorcycles as of recent, I know that you were saying that you were doing this in the mid 90s basically with your business. Yep. But it seemed like it boomed like hugely in just the the younger generation, I guess, over the last like 12, 13 years, I would say, with your Born Frees and your Mama Tried and things like that, you know?
Yeah, and I just think it's, it was, and, for lack of a better one, it's kind of almost similar to, okay, let's look at the world that you started out in the big, West Coast choppers or Orange County chopper kind of world. That was a thing, and that was a TV, and that was kind of reality. And so I think the Born Frees and the grassroots and the guys, building FXRs and building sporty choppers and stuff like that is almost like the punk rock movement to that, that's their answer to maybe disco, and punk rock kind of comes out. They were like, no, we're going to go completely the other direction. We still want to play music, but that's not what we're going to do. So we're going to fight it our own way, or hip hop even for that matter, that, there's nothing there for us in kind of that soul music or disco. We're gonna do hip hop, right? And we've got something to say. And so I think that's what's maybe created a little bit of that right now. And as a music lover, I love all kinds of music. And as a motorcycle guy, I dig it all. I mean, I even can look at like a crazy extended swing arm Hayabusa and see I get that. There's something cool to that. I don't know what it is, but yeah, I think it's cool.
That's a good point, man. Because like I said, I feel like what we're into as far as like the performance Harley scene is kind of a for lack of a better term, a FU to the big wheel bagger thing that was taking place.
Sure.
You know what I mean?
Yep.
And it sucks because I was big in that one too. I did all that stuff, made some good money.
Sure.
Got my name out there, but I fell in love with motorcycles again when we started riding these bikes and making them fast and making them perform, or not necessarily perform better, but just making big horsepower suspension, the right type of bars, finding that comfort, getting back to riding them, traveling on the bikes and not just, putting a lot of money in it and throwing it in a trailer kind of vibe,
Sure.
So, it's kind of like our...
And that's a little bit, going back to Cannonball, that's a little bit what Cannonball was, Antique Motorcycle Show got to be a lot of people bringing beautifully restored bikes to these shows and, and then heaven forbid that the judges make you start it or anything like that, This was like, well, let's take a 100-year-old motorcycle and run it across the country, right? Yeah. That's the biggest kind of FU to that world. And so, that's a little bit, what's fun about the Cannonball. And so, motorcycling, not any different than, rock and roll, I guess, is that it, there's always, going to be something different. And there's going to be those people that are like, nope, I'm going to do something completely outside of the box. Yeah. Or
what keeps pushing things too.
Yeah. And, and deep down, and I always say this, motorcycling, in its essence, you can do whatever you say, whatever it is, whatever it is, it's really a social activity. Mm-hmm. And so you get people, sometimes like-minded people, sometimes maybe have different ideas, but, all in all, you all have that kind of same common thread, and it's a social thing. There's a few people that they're out on their own, they're going to do, and they don't want to talk to anybody, and that kind of then came Bronson loner kind of thing or whatever. But for the most part, we're in it because we want to go camp out. Yeah. We want to ride with a bunch of like-minded people across the country.
We want to have somebody to talk to that actually understands
and has the same interest in it and same passion, or maybe learn something new,
for sure.
Learn a different direction from them that you hadn't thought about, and that stuff's that's what it is. And you look at these old rallies and all these things. People think that these kind of like cross-country trips are new, or that a gypsy tour is. The Milwaukee Journal held a motorcycle trip in 1907. Mm-hmm. Very early on in the sport, they're like, hey, let's do this. Let's have a big ride. And and that was about getting together with other people and riding and enjoying that process together.
Yeah, I mean, like I said, that's one thing that I've said on many times on this podcast. We feel, or at least me and my like circle of friends and the other people that are in this industry with me, a lot of us really promote and push the cross country riding or riding the Sturgis, riding all these bikes, and we always feel very like, yeah, we're doing it, we're badass, and then every time we're on the road there, we're passing hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of bikes.
They're all doing the same thing.
They're all doing the same thing, you know. It's just like we're the only dumbasses waving a flag, like, look at me, you know. So
right.
It's still cool though. I mean, I enjoy it. I like the fact that we are trying to encourage people to do it. You know, the experience is amazing. Like we started off this podcast, just being able to travel on their bike, and you're more in tune with the environment when you're that way, because you not as many distractions with your radio, your phone, maybe being able to talk to the person next to you if you're on a road trip with someone. So the bike just it immerses you in your environment. And I actually really, really enjoy that. Like, I can drive through a town and see it, or I can ride through a town and feel it, basically.
And well, all your senses. Not only do you see it, you can hear it better, you can smell it.
Put your feet on the ground and feel the the uneven concrete in the old towns. And
well, and people don't really the smells. You know, whether you go through a paper mill town or a farming town, you know, they all have their own individual. You know, ride through Gary, Indiana, the steel mills. It's going to smell way different than anything else, and you know, it's all part of that whole sensory thing that you can't.
It kind of wakes you up
from a jet or from Amtrak or something like that. You know.
So I do want to ask you though about like just a little bit about the Nova. You know, downstairs, that was going to be a flagship Harley model.
Yeah, so that was being developed at the same time. Believe it or not, they're developing the Evolution engine. Okay. So essentially 1978 to 81 era in there. And you're probably familiar with Kawasaki. KZ1 was a popular bike, and they were like, okay, what can we come up with to kind of compete with that? People don't realize there were actually two platforms, touring platform and sport, and then three powertrains that were going to be across those two platforms. So a 2-cylinder, a 4-cylinder, and a 6-cylinder. So there were essentially 6 models that they were gonna make, and it was a joint effort with Porsche. And at that time, you know, Harley Davidson was having capital to fund it was getting difficult. So they didn't have the amount of money they needed to fully develop that engine. It was going to be multi-valve and a lot of those things, and they didn't have the money to do it, so they made cut corners. So ultimately, in the end, it really didn't perform the way it was supposed to on paper. Yeah. And so when it came down to it, it was like, do we continue with this, or do we go with kind of this refined design of something that we've done, that we know what to do, but now make it with modern machine tools so it doesn't leak oil and all those sorts of things. And, you know, that's really kind of a fork in the road. Yeah. And a lot of people don't realize, you know, if they had chosen to maybe go down the other fork in the road, you know, who knows what that would have done. Yeah. You know, nowadays they always say, you know, well, let's see how well this tweet, you know, how well it weathers and how long it
stays relevant.
Yeah, how long it. Let's see how well that ages. And you know, if you look at, you know, an '84 Softail versus one of the final Novas, you know, people will look at that Softail and go, "Oh, that's a Harley." You know, that could be something that was made today, and it would still look relevant.
Still fit the bill. Yeah.
Right, and so it's a little bit of that. You know, I always say I think that, you know, they went in the right direction. There's probably people that think we should have gone the other way. I personally think that they did the right thing.
They did the right thing especially with the motor, and that's kind of the, you know, like even with the upcoming bikes coming with Harley, like the Pan America and stuff. It's like, as a Harley fan and enthusiast, I'm excited to see what it's going to be, but I also don't feel like threatened by it. Yeah. Like I'm not going to have my big twins. You know what I mean?
Right.
So it's like, it's cool. You know, maybe I'll end up evolving into that bike. You know what I mean? Right. But for the time being, I still like that. And I think that back then, maybe people were a little bit more like feeling like this was going to be a thing of the past and everything was going to go to 4-cylinders, 6-cylinders, and things like that.
And the company has a history of that. You know, when we came out with the Knucklehead, which is our first, you know, big twin overhead valve, the company, it was like buried on page 8 of the dealer news, and it wasn't even in the 36 literature. The VL's in there, the survey, but they were like, yeah, we don't know, So they even kind of downplayed that one quite a bit, which now we know that was, considered, really groundbreaking and kind of the quintessential Harley Davidson is the 36 knucklehead. But at the time, it wasn't. So
you could trade a house for those things these days.
Yeah, exactly. And, and the look of it still has all those things, the horseshoe oil tank and the teardrop tank with the dash incorporated in it, all those things that you look at a Harley today, it's all in that genetic DNA from that bike. But at the time, they didn't have a feeling. So, yeah, exactly. You're looking at different avenues that the company's looking at pursuing. And I worked on the first iteration of the live wire with different groups of engineering and styling and some things like that back, 2011, if I can remember right, 2012. And very, 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 very few people in the company even knew we were working on an electric motorcycle. And that's like, people always say, what's the toughest part of your job? I always say, not being able to tell my wife what I worked on today. And keeping that one under my hat for literally like 3 years, knowing that it was coming, knowing that very few people knew, and then knowing when we're going to debut that, we were going to blow some minds because, the company had a pretty good idea that no other major manufacturer was doing anything like that. And so I was real proud when we launched that obviously not as proud as the guys that were really close on it, but that was something that was like, I felt really a great sense of pride in my company that we were thinking outside of the box. And that was, no different than I think a lot of the guys felt when they were making overhead valve, like, because everybody's like, how dare they not make a side valve? And it was like, well, we're thinking about. And so, these are things that, and people ask me about that. Like, what do you think about this? And I always say, I think of it as the cordless drill, right? Mm-hmm. When the cordless drill came out, it was $150. It weighed 10 pounds. It was 6.3 volts. It cost, a ton of money. The batteries lasted about 10 minutes, and they took about 8 hours to charge. And but you knew something was there, right? Yeah. And now you go to Home Depot, you buy one. It's 24 volts. It weighs nothing. It lasts all day. It charges in like 2 seconds. They throw a flashlight and extra batteries in. It's $60. That's where it's come. And I think that the world of electric motorcycles, I really feel is that's where we're at. We're kind of in the beginning of the cordless drill right now, and
it definitely shook up the market. But like we live in a day and age now where we literally have platforms that are pretty much designed for everybody to give their opinion.
Sure.
And usually the best headline and the most against the grain opinions are the ones that get the most attention. So we all kind of gravitate towards maybe negativity.
Sure.
But I think that most of us will agree that like it's just like when that first flat screen TV comes out. It's pretty thick. It's pretty heavy. It's $4,000.
Right.
And then now you can go buy a 55-inch LED TV
for $400.
For $400. It's like it's the process of going and I think that's the difference between electronics and mechanics, right? So engines and things like that seem to have the opposite effect where they're getting more expensive, but it's a lot more. I don't even know. I'm not qualified to even have that opinion, but it feels like that part goes up. But it feels like electronics, as newer technology comes, the other one goes down, or at least the price of things goes down because a lot more people are trying to find better ways of making things run on electricity than it seems like people are investing in the older way of like combustion engines and things like that. So
well, and I just think that they're at some point we're not going to be able to suck anything out of the ground. It's
exactly
it's a resource that's not renewable, and so I think people maybe have an idea like, hey, I still want to ride motorcycles. What do I do? The world's changing. You already got countries that are like, hey, there's going to be no internal combustion engine vehicles in our country. And so you got to like, okay, you can choose to ignore that, or you can say,
or you can scramble to try to figure it out when you have a deadline now,
right?
Instead of already having years and years, and you said 2011, so you've already got 9 years in investment into this thing and to try to steer it in the right direction. So
even the first iteration to the, that people got to demo to the production version you can buy today is radically different. And that's 5 years.
Yeah.
So, it's, it's no different than like Kodak, right? Digital, it's never going to be anything. Film, that's what people want, right? Up until something like, oh my God, we got to hurry up and invent digital, and they were too late. And so that's part of my pride of saying like, wow, I'm really proud that this company is even thinking like that, because everybody gives us always the stigma that, they're building antiques, they're in, stupid old push rod engine, air cooled, blah, blah, blah.
For us already acquired, for lack of a better term, enthusiasts, people that are already sold on the products. I guess my generation, I'm 38, and most of the people that I ride with range from the 25 to maybe 45-year-old range.
Sure.
And we all love the styling. And we love everything. It's like, it feels like Harley can literally just throw like an LED style headlight into it, and we'll go buy a brand new $40,000 or $25,000 bike because we like that new addition to that old styling. So it kind of, I was telling somebody here, I was like, my Road Glide is a 19. All right, I had bought a 2017 new, and then I was kind of like, because I also had a full fairing RT FXR that I really enjoyed riding. So I was like, man, I got a big payment on this one. This one's paid for. I'm just gonna sell this bike. It was all custom and nice. And then so I had this nice lump sum, and then September the new bikes are released for 2019. And the CVOs had the side fairing on it, right? I was like, I grew up on sport bikes, so that gave me a little bit of a edgy, sporty, dynamic aero kind of. I was like, I was in love, and so I was like, I wanted to make sure because I couldn't afford the CVO, so I wanted to make sure that I could get my hands on the side panels, so that I can go buy the $28,000 Road Glide Special. And I did, and that's the bike that I'm riding today. And it was literally a $400 part that Harley made that gave the styling a boost. It didn't change anything really. It just added some flavor to it that made me want to spend, literally after I just got rid of the exact bike I just had, that bike again.
Yeah. Well, and that's the thing that's always been unique about us is that personalization, customization, being unique. And, if you look at, and we tell the story in the museum, like, all our bikes for quite a period of time were green. Yeah. And finally, people were complaining to dealers like, I'm not buying a new bike because I don't need another green Harley. No one knows I bought a new bike. And so the light kind of came on. And, back to your tank wall thing there, that's where you can really see, like, okay, how do we make it look, even though it's the same basic shape, how do we make it look different every single year? So someone can have something that's unique and different, or next year have something that was even different than what they had the year before. It might be small little ways, but it's still enough that, when he comes home with it, his neighbor knows.
Exactly. That's a good point.
That's very conscious.
It's crazy because, like, the stigma with green motorcycles is like, it's bad luck.
That's another urban legend.
Yeah, I saw there was a frame, I think there was like a nice clear coated green in the museum. I don't remember if it was downstairs or.
That's not clear coat. I did that straight acrylic enamel.
Oh, for real?
Single stage, I painted that.
It was like shiny. It looked really good in there.
Good, thanks.
Yeah.
From one painter coming to a not so good painter, that makes me feel good.
Yeah. So I noticed in your area up there. So you basically, as you get these new items in, are you basically re-going through them or like what do they have you doing?
Well, when I first started, that's what we did. We had 3 of us, and we literally, since the majority of our bikes are brand new bikes off the assembly line, put in the collection, we don't really restore them. We don't, take them apart and sandblast them and paint them and plate them. What we do is, over the years, they've been stored in different areas and haven't equally weathered as well. So what we do is kind of stabilize them, take them apart, clean every piece, get decades worth of grime off there just from being moved around in different environments, and then clean them and then put them back together. And now they're in a good environment for the rest of their life that, they hold up real well long term. I can count on one hand how many like restorations I've done, and that's only been because like we had a gap in the collection. We found a bike outside. It was maybe a basket case, or it had been restored previously by someone else, and so therefore we want to get it correct. Nice thing is we've got all these beautiful factory photographs of production models, and we can go, okay, this part is Parkerized, this is Watts dull nickel plated, this is bright nickel plated, this is polished, and we can really get finishes and things like that pretty exact on them. But like I say, we've only done that to a few bikes in the time that I've been there, and they never really did that too much prior to those times, to me coming. The collection has kind of changed and grown.
So before you came, though, and before the dealership, I mean, I keep calling it dealership, before the museum,
correct?
Were they just basically collecting these archives and collecting these things and storing them somewhere, or was there any other place?
Got stored and moved around, and all the small artifacts, the literature and posters and all that were just kind of all commingled in boxes and down in the basement at one time, and then over in some offsite storage, and some of it went out to York, and for the museum there, they kind of decoupaged them onto boards with, poster, beautiful, rare one-off posters and some stuff like that. So around 1997, a guy by the name of Tom Bulford, who worked for the company, was tasked to you need to get all this stuff together and put it together and then start sorting through it. So they hired an intern at the time whose name was Bill Jackson. He's our chief archivist now. And he's kind of the manager of all our of the archives. And he started then as a young guy out of college, and it's similar to when you have a box of, let's say, buttons, right? And they're all different shapes and colors and sizes and everything. Okay, and we got to sort them out. So that's the way the archives really was at that time. It's stuff that they'd saved for 90 years and never cataloged. So his job was to, let's first take a look at all the red buttons, and then 1-inch red buttons, and sort piece by piece by piece, and then get them into their own, and then by year, and all these sorts of things, and by genre and category. And that's a process, believe it or not. Here we are 23 years later, and we're still doing it. We have a person that's there 40 hours a week, and that's what she does. She's cataloging not only stuff that hasn't been processed yet, but anything new that comes in that the company's still saving.
Yeah, and you said something on the thing too, that sometimes you just get you get random people that will, like the trophies that were in that archive, the room. It's where it's like, I don't know if these are worth anything. I got them in a will. So it's kind of cool that people just know to reach out.
Sure.
You know what I mean? To see if it's something of rare value or of the history that may not have, there's no other recollection of.
And so that runs the gamut too. You get something where it's like, oh my God, that's like crazy rare, super, thank you for calling us kind of thing, to get a lot of Harley beer and stuff like that. I found this Harley beer. Is it worth anything? We
came
got
out
plenty.
Last week.
We got more than we need. But we follow up on everything, because you never know what's going to be that next. Like, holy moly, we've been waiting for this. And
is there anything like any kind of real timeline of things that that was produced?
Sure.
That maybe like there's gaps and one day we'll find this.
Yeah, we have what's called our hit list, and so there's vehicles that we don't have that we'd like to have, and kind of like priority 1, 2, 3, and then we have a hit list for artifacts too. It's the same thing of what we like to really get is the personal things that we couldn't save because we didn't create them. So like if you look at we have maybe someone's vest, right? We made the vest. We made probably 90% of the pins on it. We made probably 80% of the patches that are on it. But that's his vest and the way he wore it and the way he put it together. And so, we like those sorts of things, and we like scrapbooks and albums. People will you see that, like, it's always like a crunch to me going to an antique store and here's all these like photos from the teens and people having a great time and like no one knows, no one wrote anything on them and they just end up in an antique store. So it's great to get like those scrapbooks that are like, here's us at Laconia in 1946. And, we get those from people that are like, my parents died and we found this. I didn't even know they ever owned a motorcycle. And, getting to find like some little, piece in time in their life,
That's cool.
Someone will, when my kids, they'll be like, they know, they'll be like, oh my God, Dad followed the Grateful Dead. But, so stuff like that is really great, and it tells a whole different story because we know about Laconia and who won the race in each year and all that sort of thing, but like here's these people and maybe their notes of like, well, we drove here and then we stopped here and we ate this and we did and it's and people were really good at like documenting those things in those eras, which is different than today.
Well, yeah, because I felt my grandmother, she's the one that made me fall in love in some aspects of photography because she would literally she would archive photos of generations, and write on them and this and this.
Whose kid this was.
And then tell me a story about this picture and who this person was to me,
Yeah, right.
And it's just, I feel like sometimes nowadays, like our generations kind of lose track of that because we kind of archive everything online, on social media
or
and things like that.
hard drive or whatever.
Yeah. And I think it's
the physical copy thing is what's kind of missing.
I think it's also like, I got some thoughts about like the way photography was how important it was to families and friends and things from, I would imagine, the moment that it became available for you to use like a personal camera, instead of having to go get a tintype or something like that from a photographer.
Movie camera, same thing.
Exactly. So, finding a way to make it to where, man, it was amazing to have my bike shot by Michael Lichter.
Yeah.
That means something. The picture's cool. Yeah, thank you. Man, Michael Lichter shot my bike.
You bet.
Or getting that first time you went to Sturgis on a picture and not some like TikTok story or some shit. You know what I mean?
Right. No, so. I totally get it. And I've got the only family portrait I have of my family, of all four of us together, that hangs on the wall at my house is a picture of my family on the pier in Kitty Hawk as we were the night before we left on the first Cannonball. And I got, here's our 1914 and my girls and my wife. And so, I always tell that to Michael, because it's a special picture for the moment and everything, but it's the way he caught it in the sunlight. It's
so Michael shot it?
Michael shot it,
wow.
And it's the sun's going down behind us on this beautiful pier, and it's just like it's it. And so that's like I say, the only family portrait I have is that, and so it means I know exactly how you're saying and what it means.
Yeah, me and Michael are supposed to do a podcast. I think I'm going to drive up to Denver or Boulder where he's at. And because like I said, I'm a huge, like, photography is my escape from work, but for some reason I've also figured out how to turn it into work. Yeah, if you will.
Sure.
But when I think about Sturgis and my experiences riding on the road, and I look at some of his old photography from the late 70s to the early 80s and how he captured Sturgis and that kind of gritty, camping in the morning after party and or everybody's just crashed everywhere.
The prosthetic leg one, which is iconic, I mean, like, you just look at that and you're like, that's it. It's like sums everything up. That's like Sturgis in one picture.
I also, it's funny because like I also feel like being a photographer, not that I am, but like the idea of being one is to literally not put yourself in the situation. Like, this isn't about you. You're literally trying to just capture the world, what you're seeing in a way that obviously I couldn't see that of myself. So that's the interesting thing. There's a lot of philosophy behind photography that I've been like tapping into and trying to understand and bring it back.
Well, and just that someone's like, I'm going to take this motorcycle culture and cover it journalistically, but maybe artistically or whatever, just to like, it just, this culture speaks to me. Same thing, rock and roll photography or the Grateful Dead had a lot of people because there were people that were craftspeople that did stuff, but then there's also photographers like Jay Blakesberg that was like following the Grateful Dead, and so like he kind of got in with the band and he could shoot them and could shoot the crowd and could shoot people, and then it got he's just so comfortable because he was always there that you forget about him being there.
Yeah.
And that's when you really start catching the
actual
magic.
Yeah, because the first time you throw a camera in my face or anybody's face, you immediately start being self-conscious about like what do you look like, what should you look like.
Yeah.
And we know when you're riding a bike, when you're on that Cannonball Run, if there's someone next to you, you might be at that, maybe at that blind spot, but man, like you like that angle of that bike, that person riding it, that vista, this is movie magic. You're just
sure. And Michael's covered every 4 rides backwards, on the back. First year he did it on the back of Carl Olson's Panhead, and now he rides with Dave Perzaki. And, it's the same thing. After 16 days, here comes Michael by again. You don't know when he's shooting or when he's not shooting. And he always says, like, sometimes he'll just be there and, you'll be yakking with him. I mean, I've ridden close enough because you're 30 minutes, Dave will pull up and, you're kind of like, how's it going? I'd always be singing or something because he'd be bored and, he'd be snapping pictures. And so I got some, amazing pictures, and he shot some great ones. And I know he does a thing with the Cycle Source guys every week where he has one of his pictures from the Cannonball and then talks about when it was taken and what he liked about it and sort of things like that. And so he's everybody's so used to seeing him at different rallies and things that he can kind of come in and do it or be on a ride or whether he's doing Sugar Bear's ride or whoever's. People don't even pay attention to him anymore, and he can get those great photos of 2 people riding and talking to each other, and like, oh, there's Michael shooting a picture of it, and so he's that's where he really shines.
Well, it's just good that like he inspired me in the form to do that on my rides with my friends, and like not that it needs to ever become what he's done, but it gives me and the people that come along the journeys with me something to remember from it.
Sure.
You're not a professional, but with more thought than just grabbing my phone and throwing it out there and shooting it. You know what I mean?
Or Pete Souza, who's been a presidential photographer. You listen to him talk about being a photographer for 2 different presidents and getting to be like at that point when suddenly they're comfortable with him and they don't even realize that Pete's here and Pete's taking a picture, and like suddenly there'll be like something really cool happen, like, Pete, you better have gotten that, like, I didn't hear if you were shooting or not, but he if you ever listen to him or sing,
I heard about the guy, and I heard he did a couple really awesome podcasts, and I completely forgot about it until you just brought that back up.
Yeah, you got to take a listen. He's really a brilliant guy and got a really interesting, photography-wise, I think you'd really get off on his philosophy of it and, things that he's been able to do.
For photographers, sometimes the hardest part, at least for me, as someone that's young, is the anxiety of trying to get in those spots that may be more evasive for certain people, but to find that angle and to find that perspective that's really going to give it the artistic feel, drama, whatever, just it's going to give it a vibe, what I mean? So
we had a filmmaker when we were making the original films for the museum, and this is I gotta remember his name, amazing guy, and I got to work with him, and so I took him to Davenport, Iowa, to the big antique meet, and I was going to have a bunch of different antique guys. He was going to interview them for our celebration wall, the wall where they kind of interview some people, and he did. And then we were shooting some footage of the races there as well. And I kind of got him credentials. He could go do whatever he want. I remember like certain people I'd bring. I'm like, you better watch out. This guy can be a little rough around the edges and everything, and he'd kind of do it. No, I don't want you sitting there. I want to sit. And he'd kind of boss these people around. And, I could see some of them like, hey, enough of your crap. I'm out of here. I don't need this,
Yeah.
And he's kind of like it. And finally, at one point, I was like, you got to watch it, this. And he goes, listen, 3 weeks ago, I was in Iraq filming in the middle of a war zone, and I had, women and children that had been injured, and I'm there, and all this stuff's going on, and, they're shooting, and there's roadside stuff going off. He's like, I ain't scared of these guys. They ain't got nothing on me, and I was kind of like, whoa. And I remember like, wow, okay, I'm going to stay out of this guy's way and let him do his thing.
Yeah.
And there's a shot that he got that we ended up using where all these pro XR750 guys are lined up on the track, and he's got his camera, and he kind of walks up in between two guys, and I mean, they're tight, they're handlebar to hand. He kind of squeezes between their handlebars, and he's pointing the camera ahead of them. So when they get their whole shot, they're going to come by him, and he gets this shot of these bikes, like where he's smack in the middle of, and the flag man's looking at him like, who are you? What are you doing there? You know? And he's just like, I got this. And these guys kind of come and scramble, and they kind of bump him and everything, but it's like this amazing shot. And I was like, man, that takes guts, you know? And so that's that thing about getting in that spot where, like, I feel weird, you know, I'm going to do whatever crazy thing. And it's like, and it, you know.
It's almost like you have to do it a few times, and then, like it said, when it pays off, then it gives you the more confidence to have the ability to do it, and
the people respect you because
like, now because well, that was badass.
Yeah,
man.
right, exactly. So. And it's, you know, I remember like, ooh, okay, you know, and then like he had these guys, and by the end of filming him, you know, he had them into teddy bears, you know, and I'm like, ooh, you know, this guy's gonna knock you out and not think anything of it, you know. Yeah. He was you know, and you know, by the end, people loved him, and he's like, I've seen it all, I've done it all. Nothing intimidates me, nothing scares me. You know? So
every year, usually, like we were talking about earlier, every year right after Sturgis is usually the anniversary party, if you will, for Harley, right? And that's kind of turned into
every 5 years we do
every 5, the anniversary.
So we do it on, you know, obviously the 3 and the 8 is always when it happens, and so so when we opened, believe it or not, in 2008. We opened in July, and suddenly a month later, we're in the middle of an anniversary. You know, we were just trying to figure out how to work the cash registers, and all of a sudden we got 100,000 people there.
They turn the lights on.
Yeah, exactly. So anniversary, big ones for us, and just a blast. And I got hired right after the 100th anniversary, and was there for that, and so. You know, coming to Milwaukee for that's always, you know, holds a great place in my heart. And, you know, Milwaukee's a great motorcycle town.
Oh, yeah.
I don't know if people realize that, you know, just everybody in this town, whether it's, you know, the cops ride motorcycles all year round and everything, but, I mean, it's very motorcycle friendly. So, you know, like the dealers love to come here for, like, dealer show because, like, you don't have to park on the street. You don't have to park in a parking garage. You can park right on the sidewalk at the convention center. Like, they go, this is park wherever you want, right? Cops don't care. They're like, country. Come do it, you know. And so I was like, yeah, you know. And so, you know, anybody that's been to an anniversary here, they'll always tell you, man, I have nothing but the best time in Milwaukee because the bars, people love it. You know, parents, you know, probably work at Harley, so they get it. You know, they get what
Harley's probably touched a lot more people in this community of Milwaukee than inywhere else in America.
Absolutely,
for sure.
Absolutely. So, generations. You know, that have worked at the factory. You know, it's
ingrained.
Yeah, it is, and you know, so it's kind of like, you know, Pabst or Schlitz or Miller or any of those. It's Harley Davidson's part of it. You know, bratwurst, and you know, it's a Wisconsin thing.
So when people come to the museum, you know, like there's an entry fee, but there's the whole grounds. I mean, it's really cool how you kind of, it's almost like an island is what it feels like, even though it is more of a peninsula there, right there where it's all that. But yeah, when you get off the road right there, it's like it's its own compound more or less.
It is. Yeah.
And you know, you said that normally during pre-COVID or, you know, before the COVID thing, it's like every Thursday was a bike night.
Yep.
Which that's. Gotta go to Harley Davidson Museum Bike Night. That's got to be rad as hell.
Yeah, they come from Chicago and Appleton, you know, 100-mile vicinity. They come, and you know, every we started that in spring of 2009, and you know, average over 1,100 motorcycles a night, and that's in a 4-hour period. We get them on the grounds, we feed them, we have some good time, we have bands, and we get them all home safe, and it's you know, it's become a Milwaukee thing, you know. So when you go to Milwaukee, you got to go to bike night, whether you're a motorcycle person or not. It's fun to drive down there and watch all the madness. I mean, it's,
you know what's really cool, like even just talking to you, is that like these common things that we all do in our cities back home, but you know, when everybody's playing the hate mail game, like, oh, you know, Harley's, they lost their way, they don't know what they're doing anymore, and then you come up here and you talk to guys like you, and you see that the motorcycle thing is still very alive and going right here in the heart of it. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
And so like I said, it's like listening to people just kind of say negative things like, oh, the live wire was crap. Why is Harley doing this? They're not an electric bike company, or or they're losing their way or this or
Did you ride one? That's what I always say,
Yeah.
well, no, well then, be quiet.
And so you just hear so many people like have these opinions about it that they form through YouTube videos or other people's
or ignorance.
Ignorance, yes. And so then you come here and it's like, oh man, they're still they're still drinking beer and riding bikes out here
every day. And with what we've had in the city of Milwaukee, we can only have a group of 250 or less. So that's hindered us this year. We just haven't been able, because we have such exponential crowds that we just can't do it.
Yeah.
So that's where our local dealerships have really picked up the slack, and they're doing great things, and because they're in outlying, they're not in the city of Milwaukee proper, they can do certain things, the suburbs, and so they're still having great times, and people are getting together, and the charity rides are doing great this year because people, I can't go to the movies, so I might as well get on my bike and raise some money and go.
Yeah, we were wondering if that's why so many even aftermarket parts sales were so high. Was it because people are riding more leisurely now, like leisurely, like just getting out and riding and wanting to upgrade and wanting to maintenance their bikes, or is it the COVID checks, or what is it?
Well, it's a little, I think it's a lot of everything. People are looking for different pastimes because things that they normally did or would have done, or even when they're quarantined, they're like, I don't want to watch Netflix all summer, right? I had to do enough of that back in March and April that now I'm ready to do something. So people are getting bikes out, they're getting them fixed that maybe they haven't ridden in 2 or 3 years. People are, it's kind of like the gardening things going. People are having gardens and canning, and you couldn't find canning lids because suddenly everybody's doing stuff they didn't normally do. And so motorcycling, it's good to see that. It's good to see that oh wow, that is something, I have this thing already, it's something I like to do. That's what I'm going to do. And so I've seen a lot of that. I've seen people and it's good to it as a motorcycle enthusiast. The more people doing it, it's great.
Yeah, it makes it better. Yeah,
we had people that were like,
people.
the day we opened, like I had a group there from Alabama, and they were like, "Yep, we've been following you. We had this conversation with one of your floor staff. They called us back. They told us you're going to be open on this Monday. So we left on Saturday, and we were the first people through the door today. They were itching to come to Milwaukee to go to the museum, and that was their vacation. So that's great stuff to see, and that they hopped on their bikes and just did it.
Yeah, and for the people out there that haven't had a chance to come and do it yet, you guys offer, basically it's an audio tour so that they can basically put on headphones, walk around, and each exhibit almost has like a number or something.
And they can punch that number in, and it'll tell them more information that's on the label, or give them interesting facts or tell stories. So that's a kind of a self-guided one to do. Typically what we always have is we have a behind-the-scenes tour where we'll actually take you back into the archives. Those are on hiatus right now, but they'll be happening again fairly soon. And then we have what's called a highlights tour where, if you just say, hey, I want a half an hour to have someone kind of guide me through the museum and highlight some things, and then I can spend more time, seeing what I got to see. There's a lot there to see, and if you start digging into all the kiosks and the interactives, you spend a lot of time there. Even the time we were there today, we just scratched the surface on it.
Yeah, like I said, it's a great place, and I guess I wasn't so worried about hitting every spot, because being up here now, I know that I'm gonna find myself here. For sure, probably next year. We really would love to come to.
Got to come to an anniversary.
Yeah, that would be dope too. We really want to go do the Mama Tried.
Oh,
that's one of the ones that we want to do. And
I've had a bike in that show as a invited builder just about every year. Scott and Warren, the two guys that put it on. Scott started a show years ago that was called Rocker Box, and that started with like 12 people outside his coffee shop, and they said, we're going to do this little thing and have a little ride, and that grew, kind of the same thing Born Free did with Grant Peterson and Mike Davis. That was outside of their shop, and it was in a little parking lot, and now it's one of the largest shows in the world for that type of builder. And Mama Tried, Rocker Box had gotten so big that it overtook this entire neighborhood, and the neighbors were kind of like, hey, we can't handle this anymore. It got so big over the years, and then so finally Scott's like, okay, they moved it. He sold the name to it, and it moved up to Elkhart Lake during that vintage weekend. And he decided to well, let's do a show, kind of a cool warehouse show in the winter. And I remember he came to me and he says, hey, I'm thinking about doing this show in February, and would you bring a bike? And I said, Scott, there's no one on this planet that's going to come to Milwaukee in February to see a motorcycle show. But, Scott's the kind of guy I'd take a bullet for. He's an awesome guy.
Mm-hmm.
He's, and I said, I'll give you a bike, sure, but, I'm just telling you, no one's coming to your show. And Scott's a very successful restaurant guy, and I always say he's got the Midas touch, and I should have never doubted. And the first day, Saturday morning, there's 5,000 people lined up outside to come to this motorcycle show at 10 below, zero in Milwaukee, and I'm like, oh, what am I thinking? Just shut up, Bill. And so, and it's gotten better and bigger and greater every year, and it's people come from all over the world now, and who'd have thought? And so that's just the testament of what kind of town Milwaukee, motorcycle town it is, and how they embrace it. And everybody that comes is like, oh man, we had the best time. All the cool little bars after, they just spread out through the city, and there's all kinds of cool motocentric parties going on, and it's all free, and it's just in the racing indoors, and Jeremy's done an awesome job with that, and
just a well-rounded weekend for motorcycle enthusiasts here. The other thing,
it was really hard this year because that is the day when the township, we were all ready. I mean, I had my bike over there. They were staging them. They were shooting them. And all of a sudden we were ready at the museum. We're going to have the Boonie bike races out in the parking lot. And the state mandate came down, and they were like, tear everything down. So we just finished putting it up at 3:00, and by 3:30 we were tearing it down. And so that was a really, really
I've heard though it made for a very unique experience and a memorable one for the people that all were here.
They stayed, and they're like, screw it, we're gonna party, and they put tents up in this parking lot of this bar, let them do it. So they had kind of, some of the vendors got to set up, and they just kind of went rogue, and as long as we're here, what else are you gonna do? Let's party.
So the other thing that you've been doing that's been pretty interesting is pulling out archives for is it for HDTV or the HDTV? Yeah, so we actually work closely with HDTV is a new initiative that Harley Davidson, HD.TV, and you can go there, and there's all kinds of great free streaming programming. You see that we did a really great one when we did our Willie G exhibit. We actually had filmed Willie walking you through the exhibit and kind of explaining his life, and with all his artifacts there, and rather than telling that documentary story, here is him telling you the story. And so that's really great. That's one of them that's on there. But we're doing a new series called Frame by Frame that we're really excited about, and it's going to be kind of just using the archives film and photo collection to tell really interesting stories that you might not know about. Little of the history of the heyday of hill climbing, history of the earliest film in our collection, history of beer and Harley Davidson, and how those kind of two things intertwine. Things that you wouldn't normally think of, but suddenly, there's a connection. And so some really fun topics. I just got done doing one on motorcycle tools and toolboxes, right? You don't think, but Harley Davidson had a toolbox on a motorcycle 2 years before we sold our first motorcycle tool. But we already had the toolbox there, so it was 2 years later you could buy the tool to put in it, actually. So just weird little things like that are kind of fun and human interest, and they're like little 10-12 minute things, so you can digest them, and they're half-hour shows, and it's been a real fun project. And like I say, I get to work with the most talented people, so they've kind of split us up, and we've all done different stories on different things. And the first ones are supposed to, I believe, debut this month, the first 2 episodes, which are cool. 30 minutes piece. So we're pretty excited about that, and got some great stuff on our social channels. Kind of during the whole quarantine thing, came up with a concept of let's pull a bike off of the shelf in our motorcycle storage and
tell you about it.
Yeah.
You know, some oddball things that you might not have even known that Harley Davidson made, and some unique prototype projects, and you know, pull a snowmobile off and things like that.
Yeah.
You know, or you know, shortster thing. You know, and you kind of get some of those memories going, and maybe tell you about a bike you've never heard of. And so, you know, with this great collection, it's great to bring it to the world in a different way. And easy, you know, minute and a half, quick. You can learn something and move on.
And yeah, it gives you some content for you know, motorcycle riders and lovers of the brand to, you know, feel that itch or scratch that itch.
Yeah.
So that's cool, man. I really dig it, man. I like this town. It's it feels like home for a biker.
Yeah, it really does. It really does.
So, well, everybody can check you out at the museum. I heard that you're not a phone guy.
I don't own a cell phone.
Yeah,
so
that's.
I don't own a home phone, so my only phone is my desk phone at the museum. So, but you know, please come visit. And I'm always up in my cage. People come up, say hi. I talk to people from all over the world every day. You know, we're really excited to share this place, and it's a great town, great motorcycle town. We're glad that you got to come and see it and spend a few days here and talk to some of the people around town. I think, you know, excited to have you share it with the world.
Yeah, appreciate it. I appreciate your story, man. So,
thanks,
Bill. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for asking me.
All right. Really hope you guys enjoyed that. Want to thank Bill again for sitting down and giving us a little bit of insight to his history and what he does at the museum. Also, once again, I want to thank the House of Harley team for everything they've done for me on this trip, from the 131 install to the setting up the dealership to allow me to do podcasts out of it. I can't thank them enough. If you guys want to support this podcast, you can do that by supporting to or donating to our Patreon, patreon.com/FastLifeGarage. What that does is that allows us to bring on more guests, get more people over here to Texas, me get out of here, go do more podcasts. So it really just helps fund this podcast and get it going and keep it going. So do that, as well as check out our sponsors, Dream Rides John on Instagram and teamdreamrides.com, Paint Up for Metal Flake on Instagram and painthuffer.com. Fast Life 25 saves you 10% off your order. Thundermax EFI on Instagram and shoptmax.com. Fast Life checkout, 10% off. Really, really good deal with those guys. Lexin Moto on Instagram and lexin-moto.com. Fast Life saves you 15% off a lot of badass products. Simpson Motorcycle Helmets on Instagram as well as .com on the end of that. Letric Lighting Co. on Instagram and namscustomcycleproducts.com. Offer code FL2020 saves you some shipping costs. I want to thank all the sponsors and thank all you listeners. If you can, rate this, like this, put some stars on it, put some check marks on it, wherever you listen to it at. You can always catch a lot of the live videos on our YouTube as well. If you want to subscribe to that, Fast Life Garage on YouTube, check it out. We'll be back next week with the crew at House of Harley. A lot of good friends of mine from Texas that are up there and a couple of the guys that are from there. So really enjoyed this podcast. We tried to dive into some of the motor shit, if you will, but we just drank beer and had a good time. So be back next week. You guys have a good weekend, and we'll see you back again, once again. Can I say again one more time? All right, I'm out. Again.